So hi, everyone. Welcome to this reading. Denise Duhamel is our special guest tonight to help us celebrate National Poetry Month. And I'd like to tell you more about Denise. Her most recent book, just out this year, is Second Story. Some of her other titles include Scald, Blowout, Ka-Ching, 2 and 2, Queen for a Day, Selected and New Poems, the Star-Spangled Banner, and Kinky. Denise is a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. She's a distinguished university professor in the MFA program at Florida International University in Miami. And she's starting to become kind of a guest poet here at Saratoga Springs Public Library, so that's really wonderful. So welcome, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne.
You're welcome.
I knew Marianne from her sister, Kathy, but then we did a little program about, I read a Sharon Olds poem. That was fabulous. So great that you do that.
It was fun. I have to get back to that. I've taken a little hiatus from that. So Poets Talk Poetry.
Poets Talk Poetry, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the plug.
It's really, yeah, they're fun. I went to the other ones too. They're really good.
Oh, thank you. So would you like to get started with a poem?
Sure. So the format that Marianne and I talked about or emailed about was just read a poem and see if anyone has questions. And then, is that right?
So yeah, I think we could take one question in the chat box in between, and then I could unmute people with questions, or we can see how it goes afterward.
Okay.
Or maybe just read people's questions from the chat box in the Q&A.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And I'll start with the first poem in the book, which is called Folkways. I see the sea getting closer. I read we'll soon run out of drinking water. I've lost the steak out of my teeth. I should be a vegan. Even the teenager told me so. She said I had the right sandals and earrings. I step off the plane, look up my carbon footprint. Greenland is melting due in part to my recent Google search. All my dead iPhones, along with scraps of bologna and turkey bones, add to the landfill populated by vultures in some countries, child scavengers in others. I buy South American fruit in North American groceries. Sustainability is a hoax, the article says, but I recycle anyway, cycle instead of drive when I can. Emma evacuates Santa Barbara, wildfire in her rearview mirror, a laptop covered in ash, and a few books in her trunk. I say goodbye to my furniture and clothes whenever I evacuate for yet another hurricane, decide what to bring, what to leave behind. My friend's favorite joke, what is the population of Bombay? Wait a second, let me check my watch. When I was young and naive, I had a foster child from Bangladesh. This was before I knew how much the charity's CEO was making. I was an adjunct in New York City with 3 jobs, but I knew I was rich by comparison. I could pretend I was a good person. My sanitized love and concern reflected in the drawings the child sent. I started to volunteer instead at the Catholic Worker, ladling soup and oatmeal into plastic bowls. The homeless smelled like I would have smelled if I didn't have running water or a toothbrush or quarters for the laundromat. Eileen Miles slept outside their New York City apartment with the homeless, but was sure not to use any resources the displaced needed. Miles took their own food so that the truly needy could get first dibs on dumpster bagels. Until you have no toilet paper, you can't imagine how precious it is. No tampons or moisturizer or shampoo. I live in Florida now, where a graying man makes his home on the beach. He is a war vet, my neighbors say, but I am not sure which war. There have been so many. He showers where others simply rinse off sand. I waited out Irma in a shelter. He waited out Irma in a shelter while I drove away with friends. Now he sleeps near the restrooms in the park and shuffles down to the surf, takes his morning swim. When he catches me leaving him half a roasted chicken, he says, "Thanks for the delivery." He says maybe his luck is changing. Maybe one day soon the ocean will come to him.
Thank you, Denise. And if there are any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box.
Yes, an Earth Day poem, for sure, definitely. Definitely. A lot of my book is about climate change and climate crisis, so that kind of sets up what's to come. All right, should I just go on? Should I read another one?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I thought I would read this next. This is the second poem in the book, and I hadn't read it very much, but then I started reading it again. It's an elegy called Poker Hands. The day you left us, you almost forgot to wave goodbye as you followed the anesthesiologist to the operating room, scuffing along in non-skid slipper socks, one of those surgical caps on your head. You were going to a sterile and cold place when Mom said, "Wait a minute, what about my kiss?" You came back and then turned and waved goodbye with both hands, hands that could pull out pies from the oven without pot holders, hands that could shovel and make snowballs without gloves. All those years of baking, from the freezer to the proof rack to the ovens, made your hands what they were. Your poker hands, which dealt the cards for pitch and 21. You were serious when you played, tapping the table so we'd pay attention. You had nicks and cuts and burns you shrugged off, just like you shrugged off the surgery. We were so sure you would come around. Sore, yes. Depressed, maybe. We'd read up on all the side effects of the procedure, but you were ready, fearless, man of Bayer and Vicks, the only medicines you really believed in. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry I was a jerk so much of the time. I'm sorry I was such a spoiled brat. You only bought one luxury your whole life, a leather lounge chair, while I wanted a guitar, a new coat like the other girls, brand name jeans, a bike, and money for the movies. I grabbed everything with my weak hands that turn blue in a cold room, ricochet when the faucet runs too hot, hands that get chapped doing simple things like dishes. Now that you are no longer here, sometimes my hands are your hands, when they are empty and still and grateful, when I fold them to pray the way you did, when I help someone like you helped me the morning I woke up with a hangover after a high school party. You poured me a glass of orange juice and plucked a pickle from the jar and put it on a saucer. The combination worked, our very own father and daughter dance. Soon after, we went to the airport so I could board my first plane to travel farther than you or Mom had ever been. I stooped, having second thoughts, my Paisley suitcase suddenly too heavy. Mom told me we could turn around, that I could stay home, and you told Mom, "Honey, you've got to let her go." After the agent took my ticket, I turned and waved, my pudgy fingers, my purple polish already starting to chip. Then I followed the other travelers to the rest of my life, scuffing along in my sneakers, one of your baseball caps on my head.
That was beautiful, Denise. Thank you.
Thanks.
It's one of my favorite poems in your latest book. And there's a question here from Sue Oringle, if you can read that.
I would love to hear how you ordered this book, what considerations went into it. Okay, that's such a good question, because I knew there's a poem in the middle that's it's a terzarima, and it's 20-something pages long, and so it's about, it's actually called Terza Irma, and it's about Hurricane Irma. So I had like this idea of climate change, right? I really wanted to address, and then starting out with the homeless guy and on and on and on. And also the idea of climate change and also guilt and everything. So the reason that I put this elegy second was, well, the book's called Second Story, right? So there's always these stories, the second story, I live on the second story, and then it makes, I have a dream in which I'm on the second story. But there's also like this second story, like there's a lot of poems about like Trump, boo. But then like people like my dad and my uncle, yay. So it's like this other second story going on as well. And honestly, I put them together because it was my first plane ride. And now I know how horrible planes are, right? But that, that innocence of just going ahead and taking a plane and like not realizing what it's doing to the earth. And then also, of course, just, the idea my father was very, he only went to 8th grade. He grew up in a cold water. He didn't have like hot water till he married my mom, and they had a cold water flat, and it was like super religious and, Catholic statues everywhere. But he was like the old school Catholic that, just really believed in charity, really believed in, like not buying stuff, which drove me crazy because we were poor. Of course, we didn't buy a lot of stuff, but like, it was just like, why do you need that? So, I mean, it was all those kind of consumerism. So that was to the second poem. And then it sort of builds up to, other decisions, right? Made political decisions, and being complicit, even though you don't want to admit it, or, being like growing up, maybe working class or poor or whatever, I'm still white. I still had these certain advantages. And so the book kind of goes in many different directions, but I tried to set it up with that first poem in a way, like all the directions it was going to go in, if that makes sense. And then there's a recycling reference, right, in the first poem. And then I'll read the last poem later, which has more recycling in it. So it's just like little code words almost to get from one poem to the other, if that makes sense. So I don't know if it does. Can you, if I should say more, just let me know if I didn't answer it well.
Well, I think the terza rima in the, so Sue is saying it makes sense to her. The terza rima.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you said it. Great.
It looks like there's another comment here, or no, there's not. Just somebody really liked it. Wonderful.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. Thanks.
But I was going to say that the terza rima really kind of, you kind of work your way up to the terza rima, and it just, you're ready for it, I think, at the time that you dive into that, so it's, I really think it's brilliant the way you ordered it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and Paige is saying something to us. So Paige is saying, but also there are so many real people, family, loss. How has the work evolved? We can see as you move through some more poems, why is form important?
Yeah, that's a good observation. I forgot to say the second, okay, so it's like addressing an elegy, hopefully not, but, trying to address maybe hospice or whatever for this planet, like all of us that live anywhere near a coast know what's happening, and you kind of can't ignore it. But also like my own mortality, the mortality, obviously, of my dad, the mortality of, like I never thought I'd be writing poems about what it feels like to be getting old, but I'm so glad that I live this long to do that. So there's, different poems about, women alone, right? Women alone. And as we age, and like, especially women that may not, like myself, didn't have kids. So it's like, oh, there's no one to really call. So I kind of address all those kind of things and mortality and so forth in the book too. So as to form, the main forms, there's a lot of free verse here, but the main form is the terza rima, which I chose because of, Dante's hell, right? So it was like a fiery Dante's Inferno, right? But then my hell was like this wet, soggy, horrible, different kind of hell. So, it was a very deliberate decision to write it in terza rima. And I also had kept a diary or a journal, during that whole time. And I really thought I had this arrogant notion of like, oh, I'll make little prose poems. And this would be so interesting. And the writing was horrible. It was like my worst writing ever because it was like, I'm going to die. Oh my God. Like it was so over the top, melodramatic and scary that I couldn't, there was like nothing really to pluck out, but I could use it sort of as a template. Like, oh yeah, I remember that day. And I did write down like, what we ate or the gas station or where we were or something. So I did have those kind of details to work with. And that's how I formed the terzarima. And then the other form that's in the book, there's 3 of them, is a pantoum. And I love me a pantoum. And that's the one, the braided form that goes over and over and over. So there's one about the pandemic, because I felt like every day was the same, the same, being stuck. One about my mother's memory and telling stories over and over and over. So that sort of fit. And then there's kind of a wacky one, just a wacky one about going in my spam inbox and getting like sexy emails from ladies who want to meet me, who think I'm a dude. So it's just, so anything to me that I'm trying to work out or has some kind of weird obsessive quality, I'm all about the pantoum. I really love them. So those are like the main forms in the book.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say that I feel like your poems are so freewheeling, and I was like halfway through the pandemic pantoum, which is kind of long, right? Before I realized it was a form, because it just seemed like I didn't realize like all the end rhymes are just perfect. I mean, it's just, but then you would alter the line a little as it shifted up, so I thought it was very cool.
Yeah, it's really fun because the great thing for any of you who are poets in the audience who like pantoums, like you have to end at the beginning. So, I mean, it is just a big circle. So you kind of have to, at some point, like make the end, or hope the end is like, even though it's the last line is the first line, it's also like different somehow. Hopefully, or sometimes not. Sometimes you just land in the same place,
All right. Is there another poem, please?
I think I was going to read, maybe I'll read, this is, it's a list poem, but it's called Howl. And I wrote it, of course, it took a lot of lady balls because of course it's Allen Ginsberg's Howl. And, but anyway, I did it nonetheless. So this one is called Howl. I saw the best minds of my generation, i.e. Fauci, Birx, undermined by Trump, doctors hungry for truth, dragging themselves through inane press conferences at 5, trying to fix the president's anger. Angels with hip replacements and fashionable scarves holding up graphs, making predictions, scientific dynamos trying to break through to give us light. Who, in spite of political tatters and hollow men, sat up zooming in the virtual darkness of cold, hard facts, floating across cable news host desks, contemplating death rates. Who bared their brains to the World Health Organization and saw Monday night riots, angels staggering in Lafayette Square, flashbangs illuminating, who passed by unimaginative reporters with radiant, cool eyes, pleading with Americans not to drink bleach, tragedy among the non-scholars of pseudoscience, who were expelled from news conferences by a crazy and obscene know-nothing on the whims of a numbskull, who cowered in green rooms, undercut, retrieving their speeches from wastebaskets and listening to the terrible thump of Trump through the wall, who got their words twisted, regurgitated, returning to Joe Scarborough with a plan to keep nursing home patients and prisoners safer, flattening the curve in New York, who urged the closing of hotels and theme parks, Paradise Church, shopping malls with their mannequins' torsos glowing night after night with dreams of capitalism, now a waking nightmare of alcohol wipes, cock and endless balls no longer welcome in gentlemen's clubs, strippers shuddering, clouds of debt, no spinning on poles, no dollars, Canadian or American, all the motionless world of highways with no cars. Peter Pans playing solitaire on their iPads, plots and more plots dug up in cemeteries, drunken, safer at home moms and dads banging pans from windows and rooftops in honor of first responders who were busy at work, their kids home from school, storefronts boarded up, blinking traffic lights, ambulances, but not much else, sun and moon and tree vibrations, and the spring dusks of Minneapolis and Louisville and Buffalo, until George Floyd, until the protests began, the best minds of the next generation chanting, demanding sanity from the worst King America, who was clearly out of his mind.
Well, I think you gave Allen Ginsberg a run for his money there.
Thanks. Thanks. It was really, I mean, I had been trying to assign this because I should have mentioned too, Amy Newman, who's a poet I don't know, maybe some of you know her or have read her work. She wrote her own Howl. This is like 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a feminist, she's young, I think, like a young feminist like version of Howl. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I gave it to my students. I tried everything. Like I was trying to get other people to write howls, and a few did, but no one was really that interested. And I tried myself, and I had nothing until the pandemic. Because I think howl was for me like a young man's poem or a young person's poem, like raging. And now, you know, the best minds of my generation are like Dr. Fauci. You know, this is like an older person's howl in a weird way, you know? So anyway, it was a lot of fun to write. But Amy Newman's, I think it's on, if you just Google Amy Newman Howl, it comes up and it's really, it's fun.
Is it spelled Newman?
Yes. And it's somewhere on the Academy. Yes, Amy Newman. It's really good.
And we have some, Sue says, love how you transcended newspeak to make it a poem and sound like a poem. And Nora says, yay.
Well, yeah, it's really weird to write about. I mean, that's the last poem I shoved in there at the last minute because like, you know, when you write a poetry book, it's usually like a year or two till it gets published. And I was so, you know, like, I didn't want my book to come out and think that people think like, oh, she doesn't care. Like, I'm so stupid. Like people know that it takes a while, but I felt like this urgency to put it in. And they said, you know, the editor said, okay. But yeah, it was, yeah. Cause I think it's all connected, right? Like the horror of climate change, the horror of police killings. It's the horror of, you know, consumerism. It's just the horror of just too much and too awful. And
yes. So it really fit the moment, I think.
It wasn't really that hard to put in. Like I found a place for it right away. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is the next, it's all like a continuum of.
Mm-hmm. And then Paige says, and the 45 poems are fabulous.
Thank you. Thanks. I have 2 poems in the book. One is 45. They're both called 45. And one is about the gun, you know, 45 little records that, you know, some of you are 45, but, you know, and guns. And then, you know, 45, unfortunately, are, you know, the last president.
And Sharon says, that's why I'm thankful that you use words like moisturize. Otherwise, I would have fallen apart.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird how just like, well, also too, what's so weird, I just thought of this now, but in Folkways, I'm like, you don't know what to do when you have no toilet paper or moisturizer. And then of course there was a pandemic and we didn't have toilet paper. Like I didn't know that obviously when I wrote that poem, because I wrote it, you know, way before, but that was another connection. It's kind of spooky.
It's like prescient.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we have time for at least one more poem before Q&A, or you could do, we'll just see how it goes here.
Okay. Well, I think I'll go ahead and read Dear Memory just in case I don't have, even though it's the last poem and I may have time for other poems. I thought I should read it just to give you like kind of a book, you know, how it sounds at the beginning and how it sounds at the end. So this is also, aging. Dear memory, what have you done with my keys? I blame you, though it's hard to hold a grudge these days, because I usually don't remember why I was angry in the first place. I look at a person, sure she's done me wrong, though the inciting incidents are lost. Former students seem familiar, but their names disperse like cigarette smoke, blowing towards a stool where I once drank myself sick. Now I'm not even sure what city that bar was in. The welcoming pink neon letters, another cloud, as though I am looking at tiny prints without my reading glasses. In fact, I was on a pink cloud when I first stopped drinking. In fact, I once looked up at the moon, weeping in gratitude. So there, I do recall something. I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge in an ex's sweatpants, though I'm not sure anymore of his name or if I ever gave those sweatpants back. I'm usually halfway through a movie on Netflix when I realize I've already seen it, probably in an old-fashioned freestanding theater, perhaps a matinee or a midnight screening, perhaps a popcorn bucket on my lap. That is, if I wasn't on some bad diet. Did I take my pain pill or not? I'm drinking water, but not sure I can detect that bad taste all the way back on my tongue. Maybe I have been drinking more water than I thought. Is it time to go to the gynecologist again? The office usually sends me a reminder postcard, but today I'm holding a letter from the breast center saying it's time again for my mammogram. I usually get a prescription from the gynecologist about a month beforehand. This is how it's been the last few years. I wonder if my doctor is retired or dead. I would call him, but I have forgotten his name. It begins with an S, and I think I remember the exit. I look through a stack of business cards I saved for moments such as this, but no card for him. I go to take out the recycling just moments after I took out the recycling. I stand at the fridge, its door ajar, the cold light bulb, an idea for a poem which I've also forgotten, a sublime dream that woke me in the middle of the night, a sublime dream I was sure I'd never forget. Ah, here is my key ring, but this gold one with the big square head, what lock could it possibly open?
Well, I can relate to that poem.
I don't feel so alone.
No, it's just, I loved hearing you read it. It was somehow a different experience than reading it to myself. It just brought it alive.
I love listening to poets read too. Even sometimes I think I'll just go on YouTube and hear them read one poem. That's all I need. And then I'll know the voice, to read the book. It's really helpful.
Yeah, you can kind of shop around that way and see what you want to read. All right. Would you like to read another poem, or would you like to take questions now, or?
Either way, whatever. I don't see any questions.
One more poem? Paige is saying keep reading, I think.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
All right. So what if I read, okay, so I think I should read this one, Climate Crisis. And this is towards the end of the book, Climate Crisis 2019. And this is where the title, it's not the title poem because I didn't have a title poem, but where the second story, it appears in 3 different poems, but this kind of, I think, is the closest one to really relating to the title. So it's called Climate Crisis 2019, and it has an epigraph from Sir Robert Swan, who said, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." Climate Crisis 2019. My Uncle Will in his wicker rocking chair, riding the waves. I'm watching him from an almost submerged second-story window. I thought this recurring dream foretold his death, but after we buried him, the dream kept coming. Eventually, I bought a dream dictionary, which said the flood meant I might have pent-up sexual desires. I loved my uncle in a chaste way, so this interpretation made me feel shame, as did the second definition, suggesting my demands were overwhelming, flooding others. Uncle Will was an environmentalist, the first person I knew to get a Vespa in 1970, saying if it was good enough for Gregory Peck in Roman Holiday, it was good enough for him. My uncle thought even back then we all should be using solar power. Now the Florida street upon which I live floods even when the sun is shining. The dream's window was telling me I needed to go out into the world and experience more life, though it's risky to travel through flooded streets not knowing what's under the surface. Not until today did I think to look up uncle, which the dictionary says might point to the powerlessness considering the say uncle idiom. So maybe the dream foretold not my uncle's death, but a second story, the impending death of the planet, corporate greed twisting all our arms, hoping we'll admit surrender and defeat. What nags me still is that rocking chair, defined as the wisdom of elders, as comfort and ease, taking us back to when we were sleeping babies, that deep safety, someone else taking care of everything.
I really love that poem. And I think Paige was doing a gesture like she loved the poem.
Oh, thank you.
Like this kind of a gesture. And Sue says, wow.
Nice. Thank you, Sue.
And maybe let's see if we can unmute. Do you want to read another poem or do you want to? It's up to you.
Read something funny. Well, yeah, I think it's funny. Now, if you don't laugh, I'll feel. I won't care if you don't laugh. It's kind of weird, funny. But this is that Pantoum I was telling you about that came from my spam inbox. So I had to go into my spam. Oh, I'd love to hear the Tritzarima. Okay, should I do that instead?
Well, it's kind of.
I mean, I couldn't read it would take like hours.
You'd read one of like a section of it.
Yeah.
And then, quote from our porch, Andy says. I'm not sure what that refers to, but he's on the porch. You might know the porch in Monroe, New York.
I do.
Okay.
It's a good porch. It's a good porch.
So yes.
Well, I could just maybe read the first day or something.
Yeah. Let's
okay, so it's like I said, 20. I think it's like 25 pages or something. And they're all, well, what I did was just to make it manageable. Like it took about a year to write this poem. So it's like in chunks of days. So it goes, I think from the 5th to the 18th of September, 2017. So I'll just read maybe the first day. So this is September 5th. So we know the hurricane's coming. And we're pretty sure, well, we don't know everything yet, but we think it might be bad. So it's called Terza Irma, and Irma is an anagram of Rima, just in case you can't hear it. It's like, anyway, Terza Irma, Florida landfall, September 10th, 2017. September 5th. Irma looks like a giant asshole, Angie says of CNN's graphic. Or a storm with pink eye, Julie adds, scrolling her news feed. Our choices, traffic jams, gas lines, if we evacuate as told, our city's geographic code puts us in a flood zone, or wait and hope the model moves north or east. A Home Depot commercial berates us to buy plywood, water at least. I fear my windows will blow open, my lounge chair, my jewelry box bequeathed to the sea, my soaked body swollen for days, no medics able to get to me. We three stare at the ocean for answers. It is barely upset, the calm before cliche. I call John and Cindy, who are not ready yet to make any decision. Colonists, though, they say, telling me I'll stay or flee with them. They're taking in lawn furniture while I'm hiding away my Birkenstocks in the dishwasher because my niece Kate texted to say it's a condo's only true waterproof space. I drape my brand new Ugg boots like cups, stack my sandals like saucers. Then there's a little asterisk. In my nightmare, which I attribute to Irma, I'm stuck in a dollhouse with plastic furniture, plastic fruit, plastic hairbrush and comb, plastic spouse I don't recognize, Four looters climb my balcony, and I'm Minnie Mouse, squeaky, powerless to stop their crime. Bursting open my safe, dollar bills fluttering as though in elapsed time. So that's like day one.
And then, so let's see if we have, we open it up to questions.
Sure.
Okay, great. Let's see. Sorry. So are there questions for Denise? Or comments?
You can raise your hand. This is my favorite part at school when I
Okay. So, and then I'll have to scroll down because I can't see all the faces, but
Sharon has one, I think.
Sharon, let me unmute Sharon. Goodness. Okay. Okay.
It's funny.
I'm asking you to unmute, Sharon. Are you able to? Can you write your question in the chat box? We might have to go that way. Sorry.
I know when you unmuted me, there was like a little blue thing that came up that said, host wants to unmute you. Do you see that? No?
So Sharon, can you type in the chat box?
Oh, I can start answering Gina's questions.
Okay.
Okay, so Gina asks, oh no, Gina's just saying I'm going to keep recording. That's not a question.
Am I
okay. Yes, Sharon, ask your question.
Can I get,
Yay! Hi, Sharon.
I forgot my question because I'm in that group. But my keys and my question are together somewhere.
I gotcha. That happens to me all the time.
So when I read this, it really touched a lot of shame in me. There were many poems that I don't mean like I'm filled with shame all the time, but there's pockets of it everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it felt like you found them all. And
I have the same ones. That's why. Yes.
Very moving. It was very moving for me. And also a constant, like, looking at myself in a different way, like having to step away from that woman that I'll swear I am into all those other places. And I wondered what it was like when you were writing them, whether it was just you were, attuned to the craft or whether you experienced those kinds of feelings.
I experienced the feelings for sure. Like there's I didn't read it, but it's there's a poem about, it's called Wednesday, April 29th, 1992. And it's the night that the day of the Rodney King verdict. And I was living in New York, and there was a Nuyorican Poets Cafe protest reading, and I wanted to go, and I didn't go. And it haunts me to this day. It's just that like way, I think like a lot of my earlier books were about like, I'm a woman, it's not fair. That's the theme of pretty much all of them. It's like, it sucks, it's not fair, and I'm in a rage. And I don't know, like I turned a corner a while ago where I was just like, but look, you have this, it's like, I'm on the other side now. I mean, yes, I'm still a woman. Terrible things could happen to me, but I have so much that I never thought I'd have, like a job, a place to live, just like feeling, and maybe because I teach too, that I just see like Paige and I won a New York grant like the same year. And it was like, it changed like our lives, I think, right? We just really, like, hey, we got a grant, people like our work. But I remember just like paying off credit card. I mean, we used it to do stuff. And now I think like my students aren't even going to have that, like this next generation is pretty unlucky. Or, it's like they were born sometimes around, 9/11 and then the financial crisis and now a pandemic. It's like, I don't know what I would have done if I was in my 20s. I probably would have been one of those people twerking in South Beach. I mean, I don't think I could take it. And anyway, it's really, hey, like nervous.
And so thank you, Sharon. And
yeah, that's a really good question, because I think it's like, I felt squishy kind of about the poems. And like one of the things I was really afraid of was, oh, boo-hoo for you, but I still did it anyway. So I'm glad you connected to that too.
And then there's a couple more questions, Denise, here.
Sure.
Sue is asking, and I think these are related, kind of dovetailing two different people. How do you deal with voice as your circumstances and perceptions change? And Paige says, that's what I was asking. People more than metaphors and symbols of people in your work.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. When I first noticed it, like when I wrote a book called Blowout it came out in 2013, and it was like I had written, and it was about my divorce, and I had written like in 2005, like a book called 2 and 2 that's all these love poems, and this is so great. And it was the first time I had to like look back at what I wrote and said like, oh, that no longer applies. Because you think if you put it down in writing, it's going to be there forever. And it's, I think in a way, just an expression like anything, piece of art, like any other piece of art. Like it doesn't mean that it's like this thing will endure, but like the love behind it might not endure. I mean, certainly people die and their poems are still here and stuff. So I wrote a poem called Old Love Poems. And it was like going back and reading those poems and like, oh my God, I really did feel that way, or was I performing that, or blah, 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 blah. And I think that's how my voice like did have to address those kind of like, or my dad, like, yeah, I was such a brat and we were so poor and it wasn't fair. And then it's like, oh my God, he was like this great person. You know what I mean? Like it's like as you get older or whatever, you just see things really differently. So I think it's good to just address it. If I know that oh God, what's his name? This is really famous poet. Okay, so he wrote a book, Rose, How Did You Get That Red? It's like
Kenneth Coke.
Kenneth Coke.
Yeah.
He has 2 poems called The Circus. And one he wrote as a really young man. And then one he wrote, in his like 70s, I think. And it's like, I remember when I wrote that poem, The Circus, and it goes back. And the last line of the second one is, but I don't know which is a better poem. Like he kind of refutes some of the stuff in the early poem. Well, not really refutes it, but like, why did I say that? What was I thinking? Or, just where was my head, and I think that's what's so cool about being a writer, any kind of writer, even if you just keep a journal, like you are going to forget eventually. I'm here to tell you, you're going to forget stuff. And if you live long enough, things will just become like very nebulous. So it's kind of cool to have everything written down. So I think I just own it. It's like my circumstances change. I'll just write about that, I guess. Because I think it's like when you start writing about yourself in a memoirist kind of way, even though mine's poetry, but it's still kind of true, so I guess I keep on chugging along.
And Gina says, one of the things I love about your poems is the injection of humor. Can you reflect on that a bit?
Yes. So I'm really a melodramatic, sad sack in a way. And I just remember writing poems that in grad school that I thought were like the most, heartfelt. And people would just start laughing. And then I was like, and they were like, yeah, this is so melodramatic. It's hilarious. And then I just kind of went in that direction. I was like, okay. And I always had the 2, comedy as one thing and poetry as another. But I went as an undergrad, I went to Emerson College, and one of my teachers was Dennis Leary, and the famous Dennis Leary, right?
The actor Dennis Leary?
Yeah, Dennis Leary, who wrote, he's like, but he was an adjunct. I think he's maybe only 2 or 3 years older than I am. And they hired him right out of school, and he was teaching the comedy classes. And it was like the worst class ever. I mean, the best class / worst class. So we met at 8:30 in the morning, and he met once, and he's like, I'll never see you again unless it's past 10 at night. But look in your mailboxes, and there's going to be tickets to go to my comedy show. What I want you to do, and we had to bring a notebook, and we had to say where you get the best laughs, where people like groan. There's this thing called a pity laugh, like a pity groan, like, and then there's a pity laugh, like, we had to write all that down and then give it to him. And he just perfected his act. We'd go week after week, and he'd say the same thing, but in a different way to make it funnier, shorten some things or whatever, clarify things. And, it was like he was a jerk, really, to make us do that. But I learned so much. I mean, I felt like in some ways it was the best class I ever had, because I didn't think of it then in terms of writing poetry. But of course, that's what you do when you revise a poem, like get to the point, or how far can you like spin this out before you lose people. And I don't know, it just things, all those skills transferred. And of course he was hilarious. And I think when someone said, oh, these are funny, I thought, like, I just remembered like everything that Dennis Leary was talking about and saying. And I thought, okay, I'll just do it. Like at first I think my classmates were laughing at me, and then I got them to laugh with me, kind of thing.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, it was crazy. I realized my hand's still up. I'm going to lower my hand.
Let's see if there's hands up. Some people aren't visible.
Oh, Sue says, when I say voice, I mean sort of a habitual way of perceiving, expressing, we can grow into. How do we let it change as we change, age, and grow? Yeah, I think just to be honest about it. Whatever you're writing, or even if you're writing fiction, maybe incorporate some of those experiences or that mindset in your work.
One thing I love about your poetry is that nothing is off the table to write about. I mean, you really demonstrate how poetry can be about anything at all. And I think you've opened up, and especially writing as a woman, that you can be funny. You don't have to be after Emily Dickinson or,
Right.
In that role, or, you can be expansive like Whitman, or, so not that there's anything wrong with Emily Dickinson.
No, I love Emily Dickinson.
Yes.
I know exactly what you mean. You
Yes.
feel like as a woman poet, like it's like, okay, you can do this, you can do that,
Yeah.
And I remember being in grad school, and it was, just like writing a poem about menstruation, and like the teacher was like, oh my God. Like they didn't, it was like a guy with a cowboy hat. He didn't want to, it was just, we had to find each other. The women had to help each other,
To make it okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're like, Anne Sexton has a poem about menstruation. He was just like, just like it was horrible in the 80s. He's like, oh. But, so Emily Dickinson, I have in Scald, my last book, there's the last poem, which is a pantoum, uses an Emily Dickinson line as a title. And I love her. In a way, I think she's really goes there. You know what I mean? She just goes there in a sort of direct, amazing way, which is really something.
She has a poem about a loaded gun. I mean,
my life is still a loaded gun. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, she has some pretty wild poetry. So they really miscast her as kind of a shy little hermit in so many ways,
Yeah.
There's
a great Emily Dickinson movie. Now, of course, I'm forgetting the title, but it's Molly Shannon, of all people, play Emily Dickinson. It sounds awful.
Lee Shannon.
Molly Shannon, and it's really good. And it explores her. Emily Dickinson was in love with her sister-in-law. Her brother married some woman just so that woman could be close to, like, the brother, I think, kind of knew, but not really, he just kind of was able to block it out. But they were a couple. And then there were all these love poems to her. No, love letters to her. But then, like, after she died, they kind of just, not white out, but they changed them to make it be some dude. It's really unfair. Anyway, it's a good movie. It's a really good movie.
Oh, thanks for that recommendation.
For the Emily Dickinson lovers.
Are there more questions for Denise? Do you want to read one more poem for us?
Sure.
Great.
I'll read this. This is the one I was going to read before I got sidelined. And that's the one about the spam messages, just because it's like kind of fun. And,
All right.
If you go into your spam folder, you could probably all write one tonight. It's called I Love Sex in All Its Forms. And when I got this spam, Mindy was writing to me, like wanting me to be her man or whatever, or wanting me to just pay her, basically. There were a whole bunch of them, from all these different ladies or bots or whatever. And the one that got my attention was, are you available literally or metaphorically? I was like, oh, she's a poet. So anyway, it's called I Love Sex in All Its Forms. Spam email from Mindy. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and wet. Being in love, a blessing or a curse. My boner brew will make you a better screw. I just added 3 new naked photos. Being in love, a blessing or a curse? Text me. I guarantee we'll have a blast. I just added 3 new naked photos. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Text me. I guarantee we'll have a blast. What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Need a hot date with a sexy lady? What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Need a hot date with a sexy lady? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. Here are some other girls you might like. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Here are some other girls you might like. Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. It's raining men and I need one. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? My boner brew will make you a better screw. It's raining men and I need one. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and dry. I just realized Nora's son's there. Sorry, Nora. Halfway through, I'm like, oh dear.
And let's see. So
yeah, I do have to change my email address.
So I'm trying to catch up with the
oh, good. Nora put the volume way down and low. Okay, thanks, Nora.
You might need to change your email address, says Gina.
Yeah.
And Nora put the volume. Okay. And Sue wants to know if you're what you're working on.
Oh, thank you for asking. Well, I don't know what it'll be yet, but my mom went into a nursing home in January of 2020. And so and I said, I'll be there every month, and anyway, so of course I couldn't go I haven't seen her in 15 months. So I was thinking, I wrote a poem called Dénouement, and it's about taking care of her for the period before she went in there. And I don't know, I'm kind of obsessed with I don't know, it might not work out, but this idea of how horrible nursing homes are. I mean, my mom's in a safe one and everything, but Trump's asshole friend got off. He pardoned him, even though he stole billions of dollars of Medicaid dollars and let people die in his nursing home. So I'm kind of leaning there, but I don't know. I don't think I can make it funny, frankly. But, you know, I'm kind of leaning towards that. Maybe just, I have like a few poems about it, but I'm not sure if it'll be a whole book. So, but yeah, I guess I'm just like obsessed with, you know, my mom like married and had kids, but she's still in nursing home, you know, like how you just can't avoid certain things. And I studied with Jane Cooper, who was this really amazing poet who was single her whole life, never married, no children. And I just remember she had a poem in which Muriel Rukeyser, who was her friend, Muriel says, "Don't worry, Jane, I'll never let them put you in a nursing home." But then Muriel dies first. You know what I mean? And Jane did die in a nursing home. And just how, you know, it's like just kind of facing my worst fear, which is nursing homes. You know, maybe like, I don't know, but it might not go anywhere, but at least a few poems about it for sure. But that was a good question, Sue. I wish I knew something more definitive, you know.
And Gina said that her daughter is watching, but she's 18. And
okay, good.
Hilarious.
Oh, good.
Well, thank you so much for coming to our library and reading, our virtual library, Saratoga Springs Public Library. I never actually put our name up there. And Holly says thank you. And yay, let's clap for Denise. Yay.
Thank you. Thanks.
And so I think there's lots of thank yous happening in the chat box here for you. So really wonderful. And
Kathy and Andy, hi.
Nora says yay. Yeah, Denise. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great. It was really fun. It was really fun to see you all too. Thanks. It was great.
Okay. And Sue says you're inspirational.
Well, good. Sue, I hope you have many new poems to write. I'm sure you do.
And Zoe says, saw you years ago. You came years ago to our library. I guess there was a party afterward. And so Zoe is one of our librarians. So.
Oh, hey, Zoe. Hi. I didn't recognize the names. Like if the camera wasn't on, even, of course, it's Andy Lawrence, but I just saw A Law. So it wasn't computing. Hey, Zoe. There she is. Hi.
Oh.
Good to see you.
Great.
Good to see you.
All right. So.
Yes, I went to Sarah Lawrence.
You probably want to relax, Denise. So I'm going to let you go. And thank you again.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.